Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our daisy field project. I love this project because it is pretty.
That's all you need.
It's just a pretty project. We have Keenan here working the cameras.
Keenan here, hello.
And we will be doing this project in 6 steps. So our very first step is we are going to do a light sketch of the layout, and then we will put in our sky. Our second step is we will put in these kind of background mountains and start filling in the trunks of our trees. Third step, we will start painting our field around our flowers, which is called negative space painting. And then step number 4 is we will put in our trees. Step number 5, we will go in our flower field and start doing stems, put dots in our flowers. And then our very last step is just any finishing details that we need to do.
I'm excited for the negative space painting.
Me too.
I always love that.
It's pretty fun. We are using 4 colors in this project. Our very first color is pine green.
Question.
Sure.
Can you do a different color per brush that you potentially will be using?
Different color per brush.
Yeah, because you also have 4 brushes next
Oh, sure.
That'd be fun, right?
Okay, yeah. Well, okay, so pine green. And then our next color here is dandelion yellow. Sorry, I had to make sure I said the right yellow. And then our third color is red. And then our very last color, ooh, this one's gonna be a thick boy.
Chunky boy.
We got sepia.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah. So these are actually very strong colors and a little bit like a traffic light here, but we'll make something pretty.
Nice.
And we're using 4 paintbrushes for this project. We have our wash 1-inch brush, our round 12, our round 2, and our round 6. I did cut my paper in half because when I do like landscapes like this, it's kind of easier to do smaller than to do like really big. And then as you guys gain confidence and skill, you can move to full sheets of paper. Just remember that usually when you start painting bigger, you want to use larger brushes. These ones would actually probably work because we got some big brushes on this too.
Good brushes.
Yeah. I'm also using Holbein soft tape to tape my paper down. It's my favorite tape. And my butcher tray for all my color mixing. And I think that's all I got to say, right?
That's all you have to say.
Sweet.
Legally speaking.
All right, let's do our oath and then we will start the project. So if you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you. Okay, so I just grabbed a pencil to do this sketching part. I will sketch a little bit darker than I usually do so you guys can see it, but you guys want to sketch as light as possible because watercolor is transparent. That means you can see through it. That means if you have dark lines, you'll see it through the painting, which isn't the end of the world, but just giving you a heads up.
Sometimes I like it.
Me too, actually. Sometimes it's really cool.
It's super cool, I think.
You can also use a watercolor pencil to sketch, but just the benefit of that is when water touches that watercolor pencil, it bleeds out or blends out, so you won't have hard lines. The bummer about that, though, is that once you touch it with water, it blends out and you don't have your lines anymore. So if you're doing like layers of washes, those lines are gonna be gone.
Can you plan it strategically where you do outline of your first set or your first layer and then let it dry and then watercolor pencil?
Absolutely.
That's kind of cool.
I'm never organized enough to do it that way, but that would be an efficient way to do it.
That would be.
All right, so let's get going. So this composition is fairly simple. What I really wanted to communicate in this painting was essentially showing you guys how to create depth within a field where there's things in the field. And the biggest thing that we're gonna really be looking at is our size ratio. So if in our foreground here, you can see that our flowers are bigger, and then as it goes into the distance, then they kind of disappear into these like thin horizontal lines.
Almost like water, like almost how you did the water project where
yes. And so this rule, Keenan's just doing this. So this rule is true for all things where you're communicating distance. The things that are in the foreground closest to you are larger, and then as they go out into the distance, they get smaller. And I know that when we say that out loud, we're like, well, yeah, duh.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But it's actually really hard for our brains to recreate that because our brains love to tell us things that aren't true. Our brain is just like, I know that there's a flower back there in that far field, and so we tend to make the flower big, whatever our brain is like, how it's used to seeing a flower. Where if you look at actually those flowers in the field, it's actually like a little bit of a dot. And then if there's like a bunch of them, then they're just like lines.
Yeah, clusters.
It's interesting. So with my sketch, I just grabbed a pencil, and I'm just gonna start by putting in kind of my tree line. So I'm gonna have it go slightly angled in. I'm working a little bit lower than halfway. I wouldn't say totally a third. So that, and then it's gonna be, here's my horizon line here. And then my tree line is gonna come in this way as well. So it's kind of all pointing into the center. And don't worry, I'll make that darker. Another thing that you can do to help if you're not sure about your angles is you can check it. So if I take my pencil and I'm like, oh, this is my tree line angle, you can keep your pencil that way and sketch, okay? Here's the angle on this one. And I know it feels weird, but I do it. Sketch, okay? There we
That's
go.
not the shape I was expecting, Sarah.
Really?
Really, that's neat.
And then we got where it kind of disappears right here, our horizon line. And if you guys want to put in mountains here, like you can, like kind of start sketching where you want them to go, or if you want to adjust it. Now, I'm not going to put in the top of my tree lines. I don't feel like that's necessary, but just pay attention to they kind of go the opposite way. So this composition is leading our viewer's eye through these lines right to the center. It's like guiding it from the top and from the bottom, which is great. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting in my flower shapes. So the ones in the front are big. And you're going to essentially just make organic round. If you want to do like full round, go for it. If you want to like actually take the time to draw out daisies, you can do that too. See how I'm just kind of like
Throwing them in?
throwing them in?
Oh, yeah.
And then when I get about halfway, I'm gonna make them smaller. Okay? And if you're looking at this, you're like, this reminds me of Matisse's sinuous shapes. Like, what are these things even? That's fair. I'm not being very specific with my flowers. And that's because I want to empower you guys to be free in your brush strokes and your mark making. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time, and sometimes the simplest shape can communicate just as effective as a full out realistic shape. So I like to celebrate looseness, and I like to celebrate accidental things and surprises and all of that stuff. Okay, so big, it's getting smaller. Back here, now that I'm like halfway up, which is a quarter, I am going to start doing horizontal lines like this, okay? So you got to think about like the width of how up and down this flower, and then as it goes up, it's going to get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier and skinnier, okay?
Okay.
Don't forget the edges. It's really easy to though. Now I want to call attention to one thing, which is we will be painting all around these flowers. But if you have a masking fluid pen, like the drawing gum marker that we had as a bonus item, I can't even remember when. That one time. You can actually, this part you would be drawing with a masking fluid pen, and then you can just do a wash over all of it after it dried, and then rub off the masking fluid pen and all the area is still white.
And it's super cool.
Super, super cool. Super effective. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're gonna start painting. I'm going to put in my sky And if you notice, we don't have blue, and that's okay, because here in Missouri, there is a certain time of night, not night, but as the sun is setting, where literally everything is pink, and it is so beautiful. I actually took a couple pictures the other night because it happened. And so my sky tonight is pink.
Nice.
So I'm going to take a little bit of my red, and I'm going to add some water to it to get this nice, really light pink. And I'm going to grab a tiny bit of my yellow and add that to get this beautiful peachy, you know, that like glow as the sun is setting, and you get like these pink orange clouds in the sky, and it casts this pink glow on everything.
Yes.
That's what we're doing.
It's almost like cotton candy clouds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
I don't really like cotton candy.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
Do you like cotton candy?
I love cotton candy.
I don't like it. Okay,
All colors.
let's go for it. I'm going to take my 6. I'm going to take this really pretty peachy color that I have here, and I'm just going to start putting it in. Long horizontal brush strokes. I'm using the side of my brush, so I'm kind of holding my brush horizontally as I'm putting down my color. And usually I like to, a lot of the time it's just like getting the area wet first, and then I can go in. And this is where you guys have absolute freedom to play. If you want to do like clouds in here, you can. This one, I really wanted the focus to be on the field, so I kept it pretty simple, but gosh, you could do like boop, 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 clouds.
Oh,
Just like that.
Cool.
Should we leave them?
Oh, yes, please. Well,
Okay.
I mean, you know what? You choose. Because when I suggest, it usually gets changed.
I'll leave them in this time, Keenan.
Yes.
But sometimes just like the hint of another color, a little bit, or the same color, a little bit darker value is just enough information to create the softest, wispiest clouds. Already we're going off script. I like it.
Big fan.
Okay. And I also want to point out that when I did my pink sky, I wasn't trying to paint around my invisible tree line. I just did the whole thing. And I'm just going to paint on top of it for my mountains and my trees. Paint over it. Okay?
Okay. You know what kind of clouds I really like?
Which clouds?
The kind that are significantly closer to the ground than their other cloud friends.
Yeah?
That look like they're pasted on the sky.
Yeah, those are
Like
cool.
in real life Photoshop where they're just plastered against the sky.
Clouds are so beautiful.
They are.
What I haven't been able to quite understand yet is, you know, when you look at the sky and they're like what you're saying, there's very obvious layers of clouds where some are right there,
Yeah.
and then there's like one much further away from it, right behind it, and you're like, how do I recreate that? I haven't figured that out in painting yet.
I
will,
obviously
though.
haven't figured it out.
One day I'll do it, and I'll teach you guys, because that's just how it goes.
I'll be here for that. I've cultivated a very specific skill set.
Keenan's like, this is my job.
This is it.
For now, forever.
This is Keenan.
Let's Make Art has to work out.
I will stay here forever.
Even if you don't get paid. Okay, I just wanted this mostly dry because I didn't want my greenish mountains to be bleeding everywhere. So I wouldn't say this is fully dry, but it's not, it's not wet.
Damp.
Damp, but it's not,
But it's not quite damp.
it's drier than damp.
It's humid.
Yeah, yeah, okay. All right, so I'm gonna mix my pine green with a little bit of sepia to get kind of a desaturated green.
I
Beautiful,
love that green.
like an olivey green. An olive green is so good.
It really is.
Okay, and then I'm gonna add water to it because I really want this to be a light value. Usually if you're looking at landscapes, things that are farther away from us are a lighter value. That's called atmospheric perspective. And I'm just gonna take my 6 with this green and kind of just start putting in my mountains. Now, if you wanna use a little bit of your dry brush technique so it kind of has an uneven edge and uneven value and texture, you can do that. And here, I like to give a little bit of freedom in terms of the actual shape of your mountains. Because really, there's so many different shapes that you can come across. There are some that are going to be super angular. There are some that are going to be like more like soft hills. There are some where there's going to be like 4 tops or maybe 2. Like there's allow yourself to make decisions as the artist within this painting of really what you want your range to look like, and I'm going to support whatever decisions you make.
You could even do a flat top mountain similar to what they see like over at Arches National Park in Utah.
Oh yeah.
Or you could do an arch.
Yeah.
All kinds of weird stuff.
And then I'm gonna go in just with like a little bit slightly darker value and kind of just like put in some unevenness here. How do I feel about that?
I like that.
I think I'm gonna connect these, maybe do a little bit dry brush here. So I'm just kind of being a little bit loose and sketchy with this. And that's where you kind of stumble upon some really interesting textures. Okay, now I'm gonna start putting in my tree trunks. And I'm okay with this still being wet because I think that fuzzy texture that happens when things bleed creates some really cool foliage. So I'm just gonna like leave it just like this. Mix some more pine green with my sepia. And you can add a little bit of yellow in there if you want. And then right here, my tree trunks, so kind of where they're hitting my horizon line, are gonna be thinner. And then as they kind of make their way out, they get bigger. And you see how they're starting to bleed?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, we are embracing that. We're appreciating it. And then here, these trees are actually gonna be a little bit taller than my mountains.
Embrace it like a warm friendship family hug.
Friendship family hug. And try and pay attention to your spacing. I noticed here that these were pretty evenly spaced because gosh, that's just what our brain likes to do. So on this one, I'm gonna be like, brain, stop telling me how to live. And I want this to be uneven.
Yes.
Okay. So already we're getting some dimension in our painting. Already we're getting some perspective that this is going to cover a vast amount of area. That's why these trees are so... Okay. Now what we're going to do, we're gonna let that do its thing, and we're gonna move to our field where we're gonna start painting around our flowers, doing the negative painting section, negative space painting section of our painting. And I'm gonna use my 6, but you guys can use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. And I think it's always a good idea to start with a little bit of a lighter value because you can always go darker. So I'm just gonna like go for it. And I'm gonna move quickly because again, I'm not trying to be, I'm not, how do I say this?
Exact.
Yeah, I don't need to focus so much on working all around my, really funky sketches because they're really funky anyway.
So these are more like a guideline then?
Yeah.
Like a placeholder almost?
Yeah, definitely just a reminder that you gotta like lift up your brush.
I like that.
And sometimes what I've noticed about myself is when I'm trying to like mask off, whether I'm drawing and painting around or whether I'm using a masking pen, I never put in enough white flowers. Like I always want to put in more. So knowing that about myself, I'm going to put in even more white flowers than what I sketched out. So basically, I'm just gonna leave like big areas because you can always go back and fill it in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Because it's easier to fill in an empty space than it is to take out of a filled space.
I mean, if you guys have like bleed proof white. That's usually what I end up doing no matter what, is like, we won't do it in this project, but when I'm just kind of painting these kind of projects on my own, I'll always go back in and put in more flowers. It just adds, I think, because I want it to feel very full. I want it to feel like almost that it just looks like white fuzz everywhere. Like the grass section is white from the flowers. And that happens in Missouri with dandelions sometimes.
I was gonna say.
Which I love. Keenan's not a huge fan of dandelions.
Well, I've been here longer.
And sometimes, like in the spring, the dandelions will all puff out. And they're everywhere in Missouri across these fields, that it's just like you look at the grass and all you see is just like white fuzz from the dandelions. And I think it's magical. I think it's so beautiful. But Keenan is just like, this is a weed.
It's a weed.
That just, like, I feel like one time you gave me a dirty look for like blowing dandelion seeds. Like I picked one up and started blowing it and he was just like, do you know there's gonna be a million dandelions that grow from it? I'm like, good.
So it's funny you say that, because I have a tree in my yard that is essentially, after it's a beautiful white, like puffball tree, it turns into a dandelion essentially and just sheds.
Oh, I remember you telling me about that tree.
Everywhere. The only downside is it doesn't plant more trees.
That is,
You know?
a downside. Okay, so now I'm about halfway up my field. So my flowers, if you can see them, they're nice and big here. And these ones are getting thinner. You see that?
You know what's incredible?
What?
While you were doing the outline/guideline stage, I was wondering how you were going to fit the mountains in there. And I was like, man, she's running out of space. But now it seems like you have so much more field to go.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me, adding the mountains and the trees.
Yeah.
That page is huge.
Well, and I think what's adding to it really is the perspective that we've already put in there, that this is covering a vast distance.
Yeah.
This feels like it's a
does.
long field. But really, we're talking about 1 inch of paper left.
I know.
It's wild. Okay, so now I'm getting to here where I'm kind of just like, again, trying to make my lines thinner, doing more horizontal brush strokes. So now instead of like these roundish things that get thinner, now I'm gonna do like more of these kinds of shapes, showing that these flowers are gathering together in chunks. And then and I'm just gonna keep mixing together my green. And I just wanna say that as I paint, I just mix more colors as I go, and I don't stress too much if the hues are slightly off from one another. I don't really think that that's a big deal, especially in something like this when we're communicating depth, because our values and our hues change anyway. So as long as like people can still, or you can still tell that this is coming, that it's the same field, then I don't really stress about my hues. Now, if I was all of a sudden doing like a blue would actually look really cool. If I was all of a sudden doing like a red chunk in there for my grass, or brown, then you'd be like, why is that area of grass dead? Kind of thing. So that's what I mean when they still exist in the same world. And hey, there are times where you find areas of dead grass too. So like, that happens.
Right as you said red or brown, I pictured like a really majestic looking tree stump in the middle of the field.
Now I'm gonna switch to my 2, and this is where I'm just gonna start doing kind of thin lines for my green and leaving white thin lines for my chunks of flower, okay? You see that? Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I'm watching it grow on the same piece of paper that was there before.
And remember, this is just our first kind of run through, because the other thing that's a little bit tricky is making this field feel a little bit more dimensional. But don't worry, we'll put that in there and it'll be good. Okay, so we put in our field. We're gonna leave that alone for a second. We're gonna go to our trees and start putting in our tree foliage. You're free to use your 2, your 6, or your 12. I'm gonna stick with my 2 for the smaller trees and then move to my 12 for the larger. Wow, I'm really, really sorry about that. The larger trees.
Got it.
Now, another way that you can desaturate your green, instead of using sepia, if you want a little bit different hue, so you can use red and yellow. So you see now this green is more like, it has black undertones. Do you see that? Where this green has warm undertones. So I have a cool undertone desaturated green and a warm undertone desaturated green. I
see it.
And I just like using different greens. So,
makes it feel more full.
Yeah, I think it just adds to the variation of trees, foliage that we have here.
It makes it seem more vibrant for me, I think. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
You know? It's like a living forest. It's going to have multiple colors.
I do know.
Oh.
I absolutely know. Oh. Now, I am just going to go for these trees, doing different mark making, letting them kind of like overlap and bleed together. If you want to do a light value first, you can, and then do a dark value after that has totally dried, because then that will give the illusion of layers of trees, not just one layer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So depending on how full you want your tree line to look, you can just do one single here, or do a light value, let it dry, do a dark value on top, and that's gonna make it seem like, oh, those trees go on forever. I'm gonna do a little bit of both. I like to kind of just see where things take me. Switch to my 12 when I got to the bigger ones. So I'm sticking with lighter values here, kind of just staying within a triangle shape. But trees are weird, man. Like, there are some trees where I'm like, you are very wide. Like, it's just like, oh, kind of like, it gets really wide.
Like that trunk?
Yeah, not just even the trunk, just the branches and the foliage. Like, I have a tree across the street from my house outside my kitchen window that I look at a lot, because it's like a fir tree like this. But it's super wide, like really, really wide, where I'm like, I feel like if I actually were to paint that how it is, people would be like, what's up with that thick?
This is a science
What's up with
painting.
That chunky tree, you know? But it's true. I mean, like, trees are shaped like that. And one thing I like to do while it's kind of wet like this, and if I have it near me, is I like to grab a wash brush, and just kind of with the bristle edges, smear some stuff around.
Is it dry?
This is a little bit damp from when we
okay. Used it?
Used it.
Ooh.
But it just creates a different mark and texture, which I think adds to foliage.
Yeah, that looks amazing. It makes that, well, it makes it seem like it goes farther to the right.
So using things like this what I like to do, essentially what it's doing is it's creating a lighter value texture, which is adding to the overall depth and form of our trees. Whether that's one tree or layers of trees, you can't totally tell, but it doesn't matter, because you're just like, oh, there's depth there.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to use it, is it's just like a really easy way to create that kind of feeling of depth and foliage without having to like totally paint it.
This is blowing my mind, because from this angle, looking at the painting, from where Keenan is, it's such a squatty painting. But looking at it from the top cam, this is a massive landscape.
It's pretty fun, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. And I encourage you again, trees are tricky. And a lot of times it takes a lot of practice to get the silhouette that you like. I have found though that when I am loose with my silhouette shapes, instead of very kind of like, I don't want to say like uptight, but like
strict.
That's where I feel the most frustrated with my trees. So I'm encouraging you. It doesn't even have to be this like dot texture. Like, what happens if you were to do dashes? What would happen if you were taking your brush and doing marks this way instead of this way or this way? Like, literally play, scribble, draw, be messy, be playful. This is how you create interesting textures, interesting variation. Just try and keep that overall triangle shape in mind. But again, trees are wonky, man. One might be a little bit chunky, you know?
Or bare.
Yeah, or bare. There's totally trees where it's just like, here's a little branch, here's a little branch, here's a little outcropping. Yeah. And like, those trees totally exist in nature. Now we're getting to the point where we're gonna start meeting like our field line. So I'm just gonna start like using these horizontal lines to kind of meet that, fill that space.
That looks so cool.
And then I wanna do a little bit of a darker value there. And the reason why is because I wanna show that like where the field meets the tree line, there is an area underneath the trees that will be shadowed. So I'm gonna make sure I put in, I'm gonna grab my dark, like black green that I mixed earlier. Maybe that's too black. Just do green on top of that, like that. And then I like to blend out with water.
Ooh, those are good shadows.
It just almost makes it go like dip in.
Yeah.
But I think what I hope to, as I kind of make these decisions and do these things, is like, let's say this one I haven't done it on the right-hand side yet, this left one I have. You have every right to look at this right-hand side and say, you know what, I actually like that side better, and I'm not gonna do that step on my own painting. And I encourage you to make those decisions, because I'm not the end-all be-all when it comes to watercolor, and you as an artist have every right to disagree with me, to paint it how you want to paint it. Even if it's not even realistic, even if it's not identical to what we would see. You got the right to make it how you want, you know?
You've got the right to party.
All right, I'm gonna do that weird texture thing with my wash brush. Especially in this space right here where I didn't really put a tree in yet. That's okay, because I just like filled it in with this light value texture. And maybe these trees kind of like keep on going a little bit on both sides. You can decide right here if you actually want the tree line to be flat. I decided to like kind of leave that a little empty, but I'm gonna put in like a little bit of textures. Maybe it's bushes, maybe it's the mountain that keeps on going, maybe they're little sapling trees, like who knows?
Man, that's such a cool technique.
And you can even, if you're feeling really edgy, I'm gonna take some dark with this and just start.
Oh, that's cool. Whoa, that's like a disc. That's like a not a discount. That's like a that's like a cheat sheet tree mode. Like
Yeah.
you just had a tree there out of nowhere.
Yeah, sometimes a little texture is just all you need. Give us what we're looking for here. But it's really easy with these thick brushes to do like one to overwork. So I'm gonna ask you to like use this a little bit sparingly as I do it all over. And it's easy to like get big, dark chunks on accident, so just be careful. Okay, we're gonna leave that for a second. We're gonna go back to our field. Now, something that I like to do is to show that there is grass underneath the flowers that we painted, is I'll paint that green area a little bit of a dark value. So I'm gonna take and mix a darker green than what I've painted here. And just on some of these flowers, I'm gonna introduce a darker value. It's not on every single one. And the reason why I'm not gonna do it on every single one is I do wanna put some stems in, and I feel like if I do a super dark value across the entire thing, one, that's gonna flatten it. That's gonna defeat my purpose of trying to create form if I cover all of the light values with the dark value. And it eliminates my opportunity to put stems on there, because if you have a really dark value and you try and paint a dark value on top, you're not gonna see it as well as if you have a light value and do a dark value stem on top. But you see how sometimes just adding a little bit of dark value, and you can even be a little bit like messy and playful with it, where you just kind of like blend some of it out with water. It just creates a little bit of depth. Where it's just like, yeah, this isn't just like a flat turf field, you know?
Ooh, turf.
Yeah.
That stuff is really warm in the summer.
Yeah. I remember all the like raspberry burns I would get on my legs when I played soccer on turf fields, and you slide and it just like burns your...
Reliving the glory days, are we?
A little bit.
It also creates like movement
These...
in the field. The darker,
Yeah.
makes it seem like it's not just a field and trees. It's like a living, moving field of trees.
And the interesting... Oh,
Daisies.
sorry, Keenan.
You're fine. I meant daisies, not a field of trees.
I didn't even catch it, so we're fine. And if you actually look at a field, there's variations in grass, in colors of grass. So you can look over a field, and then some of the grass areas are like more yellow, some are like that dark green, some are a bright green, some have like blue hints. And so like when you have such a large area to work with, it's super fun to be playful with your washes. And usually when I paint fields, we don't have blue as a paint color in this box, but I almost always drop in blue in there because I just think it's cool.
Yes.
It's just one of my preferences, but you don't have to have the same ones. You can make your own.
My yard has several types of grass and varying thickness.
Oh, yeah.
So it just happens all over, no matter what.
Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry for a second before I put in stems, and I'm gonna put in the center of some of these flowers. So my ones that are closest to me, you can see the center of them. And maybe some of your flowers are like super wonky shaped that you're like, where does the center even go? I don't know. Just put it in.
You decide.
You decide. Maybe it's like a few flowers next to each other. And when they're super close, sometimes one flower covers the other flower center. You know?
Yeah. And if you're happy with this field of eggs, just keep it this way.
And then the flowers that are further away from us, we're not going to be able to see the center so clearly. So sometimes it's just like a little bit of a hint of yellow, or maybe it's a couple, like for these areas where they're supposed to be like gathered together. It's just like one or two really small dots of yellow to be like, there's multiple flowers in that section. But the ones that are farthest here, you would not see those centers. So I am not going to put yellow in those centers. Yellow, I'm not going to paint the centers of those flowers.
I was going to say, can you sneak yellow in there anyway?
I mean, you can do whatever you want.
That's right.
Also, what you could do, just so you know, is maybe like we're painting around it to create white flowers, like they're daisies, but they don't have to, wildflowers come in so many different colors that you could actually take some red and put some red flowers in there right now. Or you can take other colors and paint those colors in. So have fun with it. The other thing that I like to do too, after I've like kind of painted around my space to get this field, is you can go in and reshape some of your flowers too. If like you actually want that kind of like curved, I mean, some of these aren't working out very well, but kind of like that curved petal look, you can get some of those in there. I mean, if you turn these red, this is a field of poppies, which would be really cool. Okay, now that my field is mostly dry, I'm gonna take a dark value green and my round 2, and I'm gonna start putting in stems and grass. So maybe some of these are actual grass that's like poking out. Maybe some of them are connected to the flower. We're just trying to give hints that there is actually grass underneath here. And if you actually look at grass like layers together, there is a lot going on. It's actually super overwhelming because you think your brain is saying, okay, I know that this is made up of a million little pieces of grass, so I gotta like paint all of those. But it's a little bit harder than that because it's more about how these clumps of grass, these single blades of grass, clump together and then are layered and twisted around each other. So I'm kind of simplifying this by putting in different values and hints of stems, but it's not as simple as just doing a million little hash marks, because that would actually flatten our painting a little bit. Whenever you do too much of the same repetition across an area of the same exact brush stroke that's evenly spaced, it's gonna feel flat. That's why when we do animals or like when I do fields or anything like that, I just do stuff here and there. I wanna give the hint of the texture. I wanna get a hint of the stems, but not so much that it keeps going and kind of like erases all the depth that I've already created. Okay, now this is where you can start looking at the size of your flowers and making sure that they feel right. I feel like this white chunk is a little bit too big for that area. So I'm gonna start thinning some of these out. Okay, that feels pretty good. And then our very last step here are any details. So this is where, like maybe when we were doing our textures and our trees, like maybe some trees got lost, maybe we need to do like, I'm looking at this area and I think it's cool, but I think it would really pop if I do one more dark tree, like right here. So that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm using my 2 for this, but you can use whatever brush you feel most comfortable using. And I might just do like maybe a little thin guy right here, just the top, like maybe that one's kind of hinting off to the side, just out of the frame. And we can do the same thing over here. Do I need to put, I feel like I need to put one with a little bit more detail right here. Yeah, it's really easy for our trees to kind of, especially as we're using our brush, to kind of blend it they get a little bit lost, their shape does. So just kind of going back over with the dark value, reshaping and redefining some of these areas. It's just all we need. And this is where I'm going to kind of stand back and look at it. I think this feels really good. I want to do one more tree right here. That feels a little bare to me, so I need to...
Ooh, a little bear.
Oh, that would be so cute. By cute, I mean terrifying. I kind of like how, I don't know, I want this edge. I'm going to take my 1-inch wash, get some green on like the corner of it. I just want to kind of mess things up a little bit over here. I'm not quite sure what it will do. I just feel like it's a good idea. So I'm going for it.
Okay.
I'm going to do the same thing, but a lighter value. Because if I do like a dark tree line or texture right here, that's pretty dark, it's actually going to come forward into space. And I feel like we've done a lot of work creating an illusion of depth, and I don't want to erase all of that work. So if you do decide to put some foliage right there, just lighten up the value so it's still true to our atmospheric perspective rule. So I'm just adding water. To my brush to make sure it's a lighter value. There we go. That feels better. Yeah, that feels pretty good.
That's amazing.
And then if you feel like, if you're looking at your mounds and you're like, I like them, I want some parts to be a little bit more defined, feel free to take your 6 dry brush technique on some of it. Not too dark, because again, we don't want these mountains that we've created to move forward a lot in space, but just creating a little hint here and there. Sometimes is all we, oh, that's too dark. Okay, if that happens, get your brush wet, get the area wet, and take a paper towel and lift. Gone. Do you see this pretty cloud here?
Yes.
I love how that turned out.
Good call on that one.
Thank you. Too dark. And just lift it out. Okay. This is our daisy field.
Very nice.
Isn't it fun?
Yes, it is. All
right. I cannot wait to see what you guys do with not only this project, but this technique. Think about the wildflowers that are around you. Think about the fields that you see and what's in them. Now that you have the recipe for creating that depth of field of wildflowers, of daisies, of poppies, of Indian paintbrushes or bluebells, think about how you can apply that to what you see and what's personal to you and see what you can create.
Make it.
Yeah, you guys have been given the blueprint. Let's see where you go with it. So I'm really excited to see what you do with it. You can tag us on Instagram at Let's Go Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art. And I think that's it. If you need any of this stuff, you can find it at letsmakeart.com. But thank you for paying with me. It was great. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.